Welcome to Missed Opportunities for Good, the podcast where we open up the space to have conversations about trends and campaigns at the intersection of marketing, advertising, and impact.
Hi, I'm Alana Ficalora.
Hey, I'm Steph Belsky.
We're social impact strategists, colleagues, and friends who are on a mission to revolutionize the industry we love.
Today, there's a lot of virtue signaling, greenwashing, cause washing, or companies saying nothing out of fear of getting it wrong.
Whether it's a moment or a movement, it still has to be real. It has to be authentic and aligned with the brand, not just performative. It's about the action being taken that goes along with the messaging.
So, we're here to highlight who's doing it well, what could be better, and how companies can stop leaving money and the potential for real social change on the table.
Our guest today on Creative Conversations is Zoe Scaman. Now, Zoe, before we get into going through your bio, we'd love to ask you why you do what you do without actually saying what you do.
Itchy feet, intense boredom, inability to work well with others.
That's so succinct. I love it.
Amazing. To be continued with the itchy feet. So now we will actually share what it is that you do, Zoe. So Zoe Scaman is the founder of Bodacious, a strategy studio focused on navigating new frontiers in innovation for brands and entertainment, working with clients like Nike, Netflix, Oatly, Unilever, EA Games, Coca-Cola, Snapchat, and others. No big deal. Just impressive as hell. With over 20 years of experience in brand strategy and a futurist mindset, Zoe creates transformative strategies that leverage emerging technologies and cultural shifts to drive impact.
Welcome to Missed Opportunities for Good, Zoe. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Truly,
Thank
such
you
an
for
honor.
inviting me. Yeah, glad that we finally managed to get this done.
Yes, we're doing it. Managing 3 mom schedules is never an easy feat. So thank you. We'd love to get to know you a bit better. I don't know, Steph, do you want to start with asking? I feel like you wanted embellishment there.
About the itchy feet? I mean, yeah. Sure. If you're willing to share, Zoe, I would love to hear.
Yeah, cool. So I have always had massive issues staying put in one place. Yeah. I get bored really, really quickly. And I feel like I get into an environment and I'm super excited for about 5 minutes. And I will run around like a headless chicken, just trying to get myself involved in everything. And I kind of soak it all up like a sponge. And then I sit there and I'm just like, okay, now what? What do I do now? What am I learning? How am I pushing myself? And if that doesn't feel like it's forthcoming, which is often the case, I jump ship. And so my entire career, I guess, is all about itchy feet. And that is kind of where it's taken me. And that's why I've gone on such a weird roundabout tour around the world, around agencies, clients, innovation consultancies, organizational design, ended up with, Ridley Scott for a period of time. And it's also why I do what I do now, because it allows me to almost take that portion of myself and commercialize it and actually say it's totally fine if my clients are wildly different. I posted on LinkedIn yesterday that my brain was exploding because I'd gone from spending the morning focused on, the romantasy genre and fan fiction. Then I was writing a talk on the future of agentic AI organizations and programmable organizations. Then I was finalizing a plan for the NBA player that I work for when it comes to kind of playful philanthropy and the future of youth sports. And then I was talking to an ex-editor of a very famous magazine about a brand new media platform he wants to launch, and that's all in one day. And, wow. I get to basically compartmentalize and jump around. And I never could have found that or been able to do that in a normal environment. So I had to create that for myself.
That makes sense. And that's amazing. I love that. I'm glad we asked more. I have so many other follow-up questions now, but I'll stay focused for the moment because I'm also like, shiny object. Let's follow that trade and see where it goes. On that note, because it's interesting, because you even brought up working with an NBA player in their philanthropic endeavors. What first drew you to working on impact-driven projects? Not impact in the sense of advertising impact, but in actual social impact-driven projects.
I think it started quite a while ago for me. And I guess if I wound it all the way back, it would probably be around 2011, 2012, when I was leading strategy for Coca-Cola across Australia. And we created a gigantic campaign called Share a Coke, which then went over to 72 different countries around the world. And the whole premise of it was basically names on cans. And while we were building the campaign internally, it was known as Project Connect. And it was basically harking back to Coke's original ability to connect people and to create some level of social interaction or social cohesion. And we got really excited by that. And then, after 14 months of planning and all that kind of stuff, Share a Coke was born. And that got me really interested in the power of brands to actually create real world positive impact in some way. I mean, yes, we were selling, sugar water, but, that aside, it was still, social contact and social cohesion, which I thought was really interesting. So that kind of stuck in my mind, for a while. And then I sort of ignored it and went back into traditional brand building and advertising. And then I just kind of kept pushing in my mind. And I was at Droga 5 leading new business strategy in the UK and some projects in New York as well. And I basically got a call from Nike Foundation. And they were looking for strategists and thinkers to help them with the project in Ethiopia. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. And I basically went up to the powers that be at Droga and I said, right, I'm not going to be here next week because I'm going to go to Ethiopia and I'll see you in a couple of months. Like, what the fuck? To their credit, at the time, they let me go because I basically had to convince them that I was going to learn a bunch of stuff in Ethiopia and then I'd come back and I would, be able to apply it at Droga. So anyway, I did my classic thing that most people do when they have no fucking idea what they're doing, and I Googled it. And I think I was in full sort of arrogant strategist / white savior mode. And so I read a bunch of stuff about, Addis Ababa, and the Nike Foundation was specifically focused on girls and women. So it was called the Girl Effect. And the whole premise was that DFID, which was the Department of International Development in the UK, was pulling the funding for Nike Foundation in Ethiopia because they felt that the program was trivial and basically wasn't making an impact, which was not the case. And so my job was to go over there and look at how it was being run and also how could we translate it into something that could live on its own without Department of International Development funding. And so I landed in Addis Ababa, as you can imagine, freaked out, complete culture shock. Also managed to land there at the time when civil war was taking off. So they basically shut down the internet and there were UN peacekeepers everywhere, which was fun. Couldn't call my mum or my dad. Basically had to be carried around with a chauffeur and a bodyguard the entire time we were there. But other than that, it was really interesting. And the whole premise of Girl Effect at the time was fascinating, and it's a project that I think they've done so exceptionally well in other markets like Rwanda as well. And essentially what they do is they use entertainment as a way of kind of stealth morality within culture. So, girls and women, especially in Ethiopia, because it's still such a tribal and rural society, were subject to things like, every September, a woman with one razor blade goes to a village and essentially it's, female genital mutilation. And the whole idea is that, you become a woman by being cut. And obviously, unfortunately, sanitation is not practiced. Girls die from these practices or have horrendous infections for the rest of their lives. And so, we've also got the issue of domestic slavery, sexual assaults, child brides, all that kind of stuff. So it's huge in terms of the problems. And what Nike and Girl Effect did was they created a radio show called Yenya, which is essentially the Ethiopian Spice Girls. And it was kind of 5 characters. And they all represented, different types of personas. And they created a band together and they created music. But at the same time, the radio show was talking about domestic slavery. It was talking about FGM. And it was kind of gently seeding those storylines. And the idea was that, radio was really the only channel that the vast majority of the country have access to, because TVs are still not, prevalent in many of the tribal villages. And in order to get people to listen to it, they had to make it sufficiently entertaining that the entire family would want to tune in, as opposed to just being made for women and girls, because they wouldn't get the radio channel. And so that's what they created. And bit by bit, they managed to kind of track sentiment and small cultural shifts. And that's essentially the role that they played. The UK was being run at that time by a stark conservative who essentially said, we're not funding the Ethiopian Spice Girls. Why should we? This isn't proper philanthropy, and completely missed the point. So anyway, DFID pulled the funding. I went over there. We ended up, working there for a good couple of months and had to essentially turn it from a non-profit into a for-profit in order to be able to operate within the country. But that came with loads of issues and strings in terms of, like the percentage of people that were allowed to be foreigners to work in an Ethiopian for-profit company and all that fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But needless to say, it was such a crash course in the power of brand and entertainment to shift cultural dialogue and cultural insight and understanding. And it was beautiful, as a project to be involved in. And I think after that, it was in my veins, and I always wanted to try and find a way of making that happen. And to be honest, I don't think I've found anything that's come close, since then. But I do strongly believe that brands have the means and the power and the reach and the influence to be able to make positive change far and above greenwashing and purpose washing. But I think unless you've been really exposed to projects like the one that I have, in Ethiopia, you do just do the bare fucking minimum and you put it in a PowerPoint deck and you go, let's say that we're all about, empowering youth culture or something. You have no real understanding of the work that you need to put in to actually make that stuff happen.
Yeah. That's incredible. Wow. I had no idea that they ever worked on projects like that. I mean, that's amazing and so beyond. And the true, I mean, yeah, it's literally everything we say, on the podcast, and that just Steph and I talk about all the time, of the power of brands to do this sort of work. And that is really taking it to another level, and sounds like such an incredible project to be able to be a part of. And amazing that you were able to just say peace to Troga and go off and have that experience and then have it influence the rest of your career after that. That's incredible.
Well, and just the fact that that wasn't seen as philanthropic work too is what stands out in my mind, right?
I think that's one of the big challenges. Yeah, I think that the philanthropy category as a whole are incredibly myopic and also incredibly structured and hierarchical and bureaucratic in the way that they manage things. And yes, they make an incredible impact, and they do need to make sure that they are tracking everybody's donations, and this is money and this stuff matters, and they need to make sure that every dollar spent turns into something that is kind of trackable, and there's an impact behind it. But I think the problem with that is they've then gone down to the granular detail of things like how many mosquito nets can we buy, how many vaccines can we give, and all that stuff is absolutely critical. But sometimes you need to think about the cultural levers that you need to be able to pull in order to then shift the behavior, in order to then shift the outcome. And it's things like getting better healthcare for women and girls and putting an end to FGM will then allow more women and girls to have healthier families, healthier relationships, healthier roles within the village ecosystem, which then corresponds to potential financial burdens being lifted and them feeling less trapped. And there's so much research out in the world that basically says, when the control of the family purse goes into the woman's pocket, it actually benefits not only the family, but the wider community, and they manage money in a different way, and. And I think that there is a complete lack of understanding in the vast majority of philanthropic circles of the need to have some level of soft power and soft influence to get the wheels in motion, to then be able to do the stuff that really sticks. And it's the classic thing of, huge amount of fish, etc. Right. But because you can't accurately measure that stuff beyond sentiment and slightly softer metrics, they're not interested, because they're scared that people will pull their funding if they can't show, basically this equals this.
Yeah. Everything is about short-term results now on both sides, right? It's data, and what can we prove? And so much of philanthropy and social impact is a long-term game. And so other than the basic things like how many meals are served, how many mosquito nets, all of the things that are fully measurable, it gets tricky to be able to define your impact, when the only way we're going to have a long-lasting impact is to be able to shift culture and behavior change. And sometimes it is slower. It's the long game. It's not the short game, right? So,
and also to understand the culture and be able to bring in something that is going to speak to what the culture really needs, I think is really, it's so indicative of the work that you do and how, strategy plays such a deep role in that, and all of the research that goes into that, and even just Googling what the fuck do I do? But
the thing as well is it was probably the most humbling experience of my entire career,
sure,
in terms of knocking me down 20 pegs, because I arrived thinking, I know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and I'm going to come in and they're going to think I'm amazing and I'm going to fix everything. And I got there and I was like, oh my God, I do not know what the fuck I've agreed to here. And I don't understand the culture, and no one's going to listen to me. And I am literally bottom of the pecking order right now. And I need to get my head around what this culture is and how these businesses operate, because it's not just the culture in terms of the girls and the women that you're trying to reach. It's the culture of business. And I had no idea how it worked in terms of, the different almost kind of caste system between the locals and the diaspora. And then actually, how you do business, which is, I'll do you a favor if you do this person a favor. And then it all kind of connects from there. And it all just feels so alien to you. And almost in the first couple of weeks, at least I did, you're like a bull in a china shop, and you try and just kind of force change through, and it doesn't work, and you fall flat on your ass. And then you've almost got to go through that, experience of profound failure and, questioning everything you thought you knew, in order to then finally listen and just be like, okay, clearly I don't know what's best here, and I need to listen more than I speak. And I need to try and figure out how I can connect these dots, but also how I can lean on all of these people and their incredible expertise and depth of knowledge in the market to make this happen. And this isn't about me coming in and being a savior. That's the opposite role here. And I think, that was really, really humbling. And, really being able to have that experience, I think, made me a better person and a better strategist. And I do sometimes wonder, if I had continued on the same trajectory that I had been on, what kind of person I would have been if I hadn't stepped away and done this. And I think it really did make me more grounded. It made me more rounded as a person and as a thinker. And I think it just made me much more open to the idea of embracing uncertainty and being able to basically say, I'm going to remove my expertise from this conversation because it's irrelevant and I've clearly got a lot to learn. And I think that's something that I've always held on to, is that I've always know what I don't know. And I'm super comfortable walking into a room and being totally ignorant and saying, teach me, tell me what I'm missing here. Whereas I think that a lot of the time, especially from a strategist perspective, we think that we need to walk into the room and be the smartest person there and know everything everyone else knows. And I think that closes you off to learning and intelligence and knowledge sharing. And again, I think I would have probably ended up more in that space if I hadn't basically had my, brain knocked out and my ego crushed. And I needed it to happen.
Yeah. Life-changing. It's amazing.
Yeah. So I know we've sort of touched on it a little bit, and anybody that reads your incredible writing will pick up on this as well. But what issue areas, Zoe, are you either personally and professionally most passionate about?
A lot. It's hard to kind of pin it down.
You don't have to pick just one.
Yeah.
No.
I've never picked just one. So
I think there's loads. I'm really conscious of motherhood, I guess, because I'm still a relatively new mother. I'm just over 2 years in, with 2 under 2, or just over 2 now. And I think that has been a rude awakening to a world that I had not really understood or appreciated previously, and the struggles that come with it, and the huge, gigantic inequalities that appear, even if you try and fight them tooth and nail, they still happen. And just how society and work and life is not built for us, and not built to actually have a positive experience in that. And I think then, attached to that, I'm also really keen to understand how we support children and young families. And, one of the things that I'm really passionate about at the moment is food inequity. And it just fucking breaks my heart that literally, probably down the road from here, there are families relying on food banks because the cost of living is so high. And I put myself in their shoes, and I just think, how would I feel if I couldn't, feed my child, or if I had to think about heating their bedroom versus giving them a hot meal? And I just can't think of anything worse. And so, on an individual level, I try and do as much as I can on that. So every Christmas, I give away 10 hours of my time, and I ask people to give me a couple of £100 donation to Trussell Trust, which is a UK food bank, and basically try and raise money, that way, and then I match it. And that's something that's really important to me. I haven't really done anything more than that in terms of, big brand pushes or anything like that. And then obviously, from a motherhood perspective, I wrote the Motherload report. And again, that's not necessarily making any concrete action, but I think that I felt that there wasn't a clear enough spotlight shone on the problem, and I wanted to add some clarity and some urgency and some insight to that conversation that felt. And then, from a work perspective, I've got a bunch of really interesting projects in areas that are sort of pushing conversations forward. So, from working with Luca on his foundation, which was all about, and how do we rejig the game of youth basketball to make sure that we're actually supporting youth as opposed to just kind of pushing them through a conveyor belt of competition that kills their spirit. And we're doing some really interesting work there, which I'm really proud of. And then with Walton Family Foundation, I've been working with them for the last couple of years on looking at, what is the future of education, especially for K-12, about actually, these children have suffered huge social loss in terms of, the pandemic learning loss, skills. We are teaching them an archaic curriculum that forces them to segment subjects and focus on how much they can memorize as opposed to active learning. And we're essentially setting them up for a world that doesn't exist anymore. And we're to fail as a result. And so, the recent Gallup survey that they did suggested that we've got the lowest engagement levels in classrooms ever in history now. And we've got kids that are being left behind. And all the research that's been done on the pandemic learning loss suggests that we will never, ever close that gap. We will always have had, 2 years that we cannot fix. And then it's getting worse and worse, basically with the way that we teach teachers, the way that we are starting to remove, hot meals for kids that desperately need them at schools or breakfast and those types of things. And I just think we're failing these kids in every possible way right at the very beginning of their development. And what does that mean for later life and the society that we're constructing? So that stuff really matters to me as well. And then I'm doing another project at the moment, as I mentioned, with an ex-director of a very famous magazine on a new sort of cultural platform, which is saying that, in an era of everyone shutting down DEI and basically reverting to alpha male, misogynist, racist, horrendous tropes, there's got to be a voice out there that does better and that pushes back and says, no, we're not going backwards. We need to do something that continues that progress. And so those are projects that are really, really close to my heart as well.
I mean, well, thank you in advance for what you're doing to help create that new voice and that next platform that's needed now more than ever. And for all that you do. I mean, it's incredible work that you do, Zoe, truly.
Thank you. I mean, I'm just trying to do my bit. And then I've also, I don't know if you saw it, but I wrote Growth Squared recently as well, which was a bit of a meditation on how do we marry the future of business with the future of not burning our entire planet to the ground, not just focused on sustainability, but just focus on is there a better way to figure out what growth looks like in this era? And I think, I read a lot of stuff by Kevin Kelly, and he talked about type 2 growth, which I love. And he's written another piece last week, which I also was just adored. And he's talking about the fact that in the next 10 years, for the very first time in 1,000 years, we will reverse our population. And we're going to start going backwards very, very quickly because the birth rate is declining so dramatically around the world. And that's not necessarily the end of the world if we can find a way to do it. But our current system of capitalism is based on more people, more goods, more resources, more. And so if our population starts to reverse in the trend that he's predicting and in the way that many others are predicting as well, the current system that we have for our economies will not hold. And so what's the alternative? And how do we start to think about that in a different way? Yeah. And I called it Growth Squared because I was looking at, how do we start to look at type 1 growth, which is our kind of linear stuff, with this idea of type 2 growth. And type 2 growth is the other definition of growth in the English language, which is depth and substance and enrichment and better and quality. And how do we kind of multiply those two things to translate what the future of business could look like? And I'm doing a talk in Berlin week after next, actually, which is terrifying, on all of this for the House of Beautiful Business. And it's amazing. So it starts at 9:00 at night, and it basically devolves into a rave. And they've got some incredible speakers, cool. Incredible psychologists and, the head of NPR and that kind of stuff as well, all basically coming together to discuss, can we do this differently? And I'm opening the event, which has got me absolutely shitting myself, to be honest. But
You're gonna do great.
Oh my God, that's so amazing. I mean, yeah, I wish I could go be a part of that. That's amazing. I literally just picked up a book yesterday from the library on degrowth because, I mean, pretty much every topic that you mentioned is something that I am also personally interested in. And I will say it's amazing how once you become a mom, I feel like you join a secret club, but also your perspective about the world shows up in a completely different way. At least for me, before becoming a mom, I looked around and I was like, everybody's doing it. How hard can it be? And people work, people have kids, everyone seems to be functioning just fine. And then you have children. And my daughter was born during COVID. I only have one during early COVID. So she's almost 5. And it's mind blowing to realize how unprepared we are as a society to receive moms once they become moms. And then also all the other inequities you start to realize in the schooling system. I mean, I'm in Los Angeles, and even just looking at the schooling system here, and we live in, at least California still has free meals for kids in public schools, in elementary schools and things like that. But who knows with the current government how long that's going to last. And the education system is so outdated, and just it sets us up for our future society. And then I'm also very passionate about climate as well. What is our future world like, and how can we start creating for a better world and prepare youth for that today? Is, I mean, it's all interconnected, right? So
100%, all of it is connected. And I think, I don't know if you both went through this as well, but I felt like when I was pregnant, my empathy switch got dialed up to 11, to the point that I would have full-on meltdowns watching a cartoon. That's how much I over empathize. And I'd be watching something and I would just burst into tears, and my husband would look over and he's like, "Oh my God, you're crying again." I was like, "I can't stop." And since I've actually had the children and they're now out of my body, it's gotten even worse. And so I now have this problem that, Brené Brown has kind of talked about, that she's suffered with a lot as well, is that I don't necessarily just empathize. I literally put myself in their situation, and then I have a complete breakdown. And that's why I really struggle with, scrolling past stuff on, Gaza, for example, is I will put myself in the situation of that parent and I will be devastated, and then I can't sleep. And I just haven't been able to ever dial that down or turn that off since I've had children. And I think that's now making me so much more aware of the legacy that I want to leave and the impact that I want to have. Even if everything feels like it's incredibly overwhelming, I have to try and do something. And I think pre babies, I definitely was always empathetic, but at nothing like this level. And some part of me wishes I could turn it off on occasion, but it's just always there, kind of following me around.
Yeah.
Well, and I think,
oh, sorry. Go for it.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I think having that level of empathy, though, and vulnerability makes you a better leader, makes you a better business owner, makes you, yes, a better mom, but also a better human too. And so, like, I think that's also a real strength, and it takes a lot of guts to just, break down at any given moment, and to also to help normalize that as being okay, and kind of breaking the stigma of we have to have it all together all the time, because no one does, and we can't. And I was just watching a masterclass by Whitney Wolfe Herd, and creator of Bumble, and she was saying how, she had severe postpartum depression right after she gave birth, and had all these complications during her labor, and she shared that with her team so that they knew what was going on, so that she didn't have to just keep it all together and keep it inside. And that allowed for other people on her team to come to her more often and say, I have this problem. I really want to talk to you. I really want to let you know what's happening. And not that, we need to share everything at work, but we're there so often that, it just makes us more human. And so I love that. And I know that it's inconvenient to have those types of empathetic emotions, and to
but I think it's
also
critical.
beautiful.
And I love what Brené Brown says about, soft front, strong back, wild heart, and that's kind of where we need to, we really need to kind of double down. And I think, after I had children, especially with my first, with Audrey, I had a really awful birth, and I hemorrhaged, and I ended up having to have a drain sewn into my C-section, and I was in hospital for quite a while. And, that was not the introduction to motherhood I had imagined. It was horrendous. And then I really struggled in terms of bonding and what the fuck has just happened to me, and then also getting back into work. And I had never taken time off before, since working on my own. So I took 3 months off, and then my husband was able to take some parental leave, and I got back in, and it was just like, oh, hang on a minute, I've not filled my pipeline. What if I don't have any money coming in? And I didn't, for a period of time. And then I went through this whole cycle of, oh my God, am I going to have to sell the car? Do I need to sell the house? How do I generate money? And then I've suddenly got this baby that I'm responsible for, and I feel like I'm failing her. And so that first experience of having a baby, going through that horrendous birth, struggling to bond, coming back to work with no pipeline, and being the breadwinner, it destroyed me completely. I was an absolute mess. And I think it ruined that whole period for me, to be honest. And then when I got pregnant with my second, I basically didn't have a maternity leave. I worked all the way through because I was so scared of not having that income. And so I wanted to kind of keep all the wheels spinning. But then that made it incredibly stressful because I'm trying to join conference calls while, I'm still bleeding and my boobs are leaking and my baby's screaming and I haven't slept. And I would still try to turn up and be like super perky and happy and I can do this, and kind of prove that I was still, a valuable member of the team, because you do have that perception in your mind that you've got to almost kind of overdo it and oversell. People see you as less than, and actually, a diluted version of what you were previously. And I think I did that for a period of time. And then over the last kind of 6-7 months, I've just been like, God, this is bullshit. It really is bullshit. And I want to be able to kind of be honest about what this experience is like and how fucking hard it is. And I think a lot of women were contacting me and saying, how do you do it all? And I realized that by not talking about it, I was almost kind of putting out a false vision of what was possible. And women from afar were looking at me and going, oh, she's doing really well. She's got clients. She's successful. She's got 2 young kids. How the hell is she doing all of this? And if she can do it, why can't I do it? And therefore I feel like a failure. And I got loads of DMs with that vein. And I was like, right, this is not good. I need to be much more vulnerable and much more honest and much more open about how I'm feeling and the realities of how fucking hard it is and how I'm struggling and how I'm not happy. And, and I'm still just trying to stop things from smashing all around me every single day. And so I've made a real concerted effort over the last couple of months to be more publicly honest about it. And that's obviously why I wrote The Motherload as well. I wanted to shine light on it. And I wrote The Motherload when I was 11 weeks postpartum with my second. And it was like a rage write, to be honest. I was so angry. It was like flowing out of me. And it was a really sort of cathartic thing to get it out there. And it was a really hard thing to do and to get out into the world, but it felt amazing when it was out. And I got obviously inundated with so many women saying, thank you for putting this down in words. And that meant so much to me because I was trying to give them not necessarily a voice, because they've all got their own voices, but I think a collective, unified voice, and also a way for them to read it and say, oh, I'm not alone in this. This has happened to other people. I've been gaslit. It's okay to feel like you're unhappy and you need to walk away, at certain moments. It's okay to feel like you don't want to go back to work, or it's okay to feel like you do desperately want to go back to work and you want to escape your kids. That's a break for you. Either way, it doesn't matter. And I wanted that to kind of really come to the fore. And I think it did. And then, I get the normal thing of just lots of people kind of feeling really riled up and wanting to do something and wanting to turn it into action. And I had that actually when I wrote Mad Men, Furious Women, which was pre-kids. And that was about sexual assault and sexual harassment in the ad industry. And that was quite a cathartic write as well. But again, when that came out, I literally published it, went to sleep, woke up, and I had about 2,000 emails. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? And that was hard because it was about 2,000 emails, mostly of women pouring out their trauma. And I felt like I had the responsibility to read all of that and reply to all of it. And again, with the empathy thing, God, that was hard. Just like taking that all in, ways to reply to them. And I got there in the end. It took me about a year to get back to everybody. And then I had people kind of going, great, cool, you've written this. What are we doing now? How do we organize? How do we do this? And I didn't have children. I didn't have a partner. And I was like, yeah, cool. I need to like be Bodacious and I need to lead this movement. And it almost crushed me. I got to the point where I was like, I don't want to be this woman that's just labeled as only caring about, sexual assault and sexual harassment and constantly getting angry about it. I still want to do strategy work. What if I get labeled in that way and then I can't find anyone to hire me in the other vein? And also this stuff is heavy and it's exhausting. And I don't know if I've got the energy to keep this up the entire time. So I went to go and see therapist. And she kind of said, do you never just think that maybe that was your role? And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, your role was you wrote it, you lit the match, you helped everybody feel ignited. You're done now. Like, you can step away now. I was like, oh, fuck, can I? And so the same thing with the mother load is, you know, I put it out there, but then I had my therapist in the back of my head going, you're done now. You know, you've done your piece, you've written it. That's the role that you play, is you're able to wield your words to, you know, inspire people or to get people wanting to change behavior or wanting to kind of drive action, but you don't have to be the one pulling them all along behind you. Like, your role can just be massive fucking spotlight, everybody reading it, everybody aligned, cool, off you go. See you later. And I feel so much more comfortable with that now as a role, whereas previously I felt a huge amount of guilt that I didn't feel like I could pull anything off from an action perspective. So just huge amounts of pressure, and then imposter syndrome, or maybe I shouldn't have written this if I can't then follow it through. And again, you just understand that people have different strengths and different roles in this process.
Yes, to all of that. And that was literally what I was going to point out actually earlier, was that you had said when you were talking about the motherhood report, how all you had done was written this piece and there was no action piece behind it. But I think there is something that's so powerful with being able to put the words to it, give those people a voice, for people to know they're not alone. And sometimes, yes, we talk a lot about action, but there's also that piece we were talking about earlier about shifting culture and behavior change and the understanding behind it. So bringing the awareness to it of an issue to the forefront and getting it in front of people, or giving people, especially the way that you put these reports together, right? It's a tool that somebody can then take with them, and they can rally other people with them, and they can go take action, or they can bring it to their place of work and say, do you see what's happening here? How can we implement policies to support this, or to their government, or to wherever it may be? And so I think you're giving people still a very tangible resource in a lot of ways, where people can leverage that information in a really concise way, other than saying, well, I've read all these things in all these different places, but now what do I do with this information? So I think you are doing so much more than you even know. And I think it's incredible. And I think even just using your voice to be able to, you know, consistently share that this is hard is so important for women and men to hear, because also just as much as, you know, as women, we're trying to achieve something that's not real. I think men think that, well, they just either are doing it all, or they're going to all leave early and go pick up their kids from school. And so this is why we don't trust them in leadership positions or whatever else. Right. And so it helps show breadth to the experience. And I think, you know, I constantly think that more people should do it. It's interesting because you've seen some of these initiatives that, whether they stick or not, or have the effect or not, TBD, like putting motherhood on the resume, or just putting mom on your LinkedIn, or things like that. But being able to share these experiences, I think, helps empower everybody and be able to get people thinking about ways we can solve for the systems. And it uncovers what's broken, right, in all of our systems, in education, in parenting, in childcare, and all the pieces. So thank you for all the work that you are doing, because you are doing a lot.
It does feel like that sometimes, but no, I want to model something different. I always tried to do that. And I think, you know, there aren't that many relatively well-known women or high-profile women in this industry. You know, Cindy's been basically banging the drum for all of us for decades, and she's amazing. You know, Kat as well, from 3% Conference. My God, what she managed to pull off over 10 years was just phenomenal. You know, and I had a really good conversation with her actually after I published Mad Men, Furious Women, and before Motherload as well. And she really helped me to understand my role versus other people's role. And, you know, she then moved away from 3% Conference to move back into being a creative director. And she said, you know, quite rightly, I've done my time, you know, and I've made a massive impact, and it's been wonderful, but I miss my job. You know, I miss creative stuff, and I want to get back to it. And I was like, that's amazing. So I think also where we get to with a lot of change work, and when we're sort of trying to push for behavior change, is exhaustion and burnout, because you cannot occupy the mindset and the emotional fraying that is just constant rage and fear and disappointment. And you can't live in that space. It's not sustainable. It will crush you. And I think I tried to live in that space after Mad Men, Furious Women, because that was honestly my first proper taste of being a driver of some sort of movement. And I couldn't get out of bed. I struggled to even have a shower. I wasn't feeding myself because that's all I could think about. Like, what can I do? What can I do? And I was just filled with kind of rage the whole time. And I think when it comes to philanthropy work and change work, you have to find a place of joy that you can occupy, even if that makes you feel a little bit guilty. But joy and calming down and stepping away, that's how you refill your tank. And you've got to keep refilling your tank in order to keep running at this stuff. And so I think that it's fine for you to take a gap and it's fine for you to do something different. And, after I published the Motherload, I was like, cool, that's me done for now in that area. And now I'm going to go back to my day job and I'm going to go and build a brand or something. Because sometimes it's a struggle, but you have cognitive dissonance around it because it just feels like you've got this big, meaty, substantive, move the world forward kind of thing. And then the flip side, you've got this trivial shit that pays the bills. But you've got to find a way of balancing those two, because one of them gives you, well, sustenance quite literally, but also kind of feeds your brain in a different way. The other one requires different types of energy, and you've got to be able to kind of shift in between those two balances. Because as I said, just occupying that space of rage and exhaustion and disappointment, you're going to burn yourself out so quickly, and then you're no good to anyone.
Yeah. It's like all the lessons around being a mother and motherhood and work as well. It's like all parallel experiences
to this. Yeah, that would be nice. But yeah, it's a really, really hard place. But I just want to make sure that I'm modeling it to the best of my ability, because I think younger strategists, especially, not just strategists, but younger women in the industry, they need to see that you can talk about this stuff and you can be honest about it. And I don't just want to go out there and show this kind of polished, perfect image of success, because that's bollocks. None of it's actually true. There's a whole heap of shit that goes behind it. And I fail on a regular basis, and I make mistakes, and I'm exhausted, and I burn out on occasion. But it's everything. It's not just, the motherhood side of things. It's also, I talk about my own success. I blow my own trumpet because women don't do that enough. And when I first started doing that, I got so much kickback, mostly from men. Oh my God, she's so fucking arrogant. Why do you have to say this stuff? Why do you have to make other people feel bad? And I was like, that's not
It's not about you. Yeah.
Right. Feel bad. That's on you. That's not on me. Before I had my son, just before I was going on maternity leave, I posted on LinkedIn that I had managed to earn, 6 figures in 3 months. And that was me kind of saying, I've driven myself to this. Yeah, exactly. I'm blowing my own fucking trumpet, and that's fine. If you don't like it and you don't want to read it, skip on by all means. But I want to normalize women patting themselves on the back. I want to normalize them talking about economic success. If you make a whole boatload of cash, fucking shout it from the rooftops. That's amazing. Totally. If you sign a new contract, shout about it. Anything that you've achieved, shout about it. Because I think we're short to kind of keep our successes small and humble and silent. But if we do that, we're not banging our own drum that other people take notice, and then that opens up new opportunities for us. And we have to practice the ability to kind of celebrate our own successes and put ourselves out there, because that translates into every single aspect of your life. It translates into your personal relationships. It translates into how you advocate for yourself at work. It translates into how brave you are in terms of jumping ship and doing your own thing, or going somewhere else because they're going to pay you an extra 20 grand, and not being gaslit into staying put because, you've got great maternal energy for the team, and well done you. And I think that, we just need more of that stuff out there in public. So I do post a huge amount. And, I even got someone accidentally forwarding a post of mine back to me last week going, oh my God, another post from her. Doesn't she ever shut up? And I was like, oh, nice. Okay. But, and I wrote back and I said,
no, you want some more? I'll give you some more right now. You interested?
So I just replied saying, appreciate the feedback. The unfollow button is right there if you want it. But you follow me, so this is kind of how this shit works. And I just think, I don't care about that stuff. I just want to make sure that I'm putting a voice out there so that whoever needs to read it at any point in time, whether it's someone looking to push themselves financially, whether it's someone who's down in the trenches at the moment on motherhood, whether it's someone who's thinking about jumping ship, I want to be a resource for all of those people. And that's why I'm so prolific.
Yeah, I think that is such a good point to make, that it is so important as well for women to toot their own horn, because there is so much of how we're raised often in that if you put your head down, you do the work, people will notice. But the reality of it is
they don't.
People aren't going to notice unless you talk about it. I mean, Steph, weren't you had started consciously posting about that as well this year. And I think it's definitely a conversation that needs to happen more, and that we should all continue to follow your example and practice more of.
I was gonna say, I literally have I said this on one of our podcasts. It was actually right after the first episode after maternity leave. And I came in and I was like, okay, you know what, Alana, like Rent the Runway, this whole campaign that they did, it was crap because women can't toot their own horns. And I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm going to do it for the 8 million women that couldn't do it. And I started writing and I freaked out. And I just had this overwhelming amount of shame of like, well, wait a second. Are you actually proud of that thing that you did? And does it like how much of a part of that thing that you were a part of can you actually talk about, because you only had this small role in it. And it's like we get so in our heads about it. And this is yet another reminder. Thank you, Zoe. I will be writing this series.
We're holding you accountable, Steph.
I know, you have to. You have to. And it was funny, actually. Another listener let me know. She was like, so when's the series coming out? And I was like, God damn it. I can't escape. And we should
do it. Get out there. And also just like, if you have that shame around yourself, think about the fact that you're not doing it for you necessarily.
Yes,
you're doing it for other women who are facing those same kind of things. And I think that that's one of the things that I've been so bolstered by over the last couple of years, is just the amount of DMs that I get from women saying, you don't know how much you've helped me or influenced me, or I needed to hear that today. Thank you. Or I showed this. I got a message the other day. I wrote a post about rejection as redirection, and I talked about some of the jobs that I've been rejected from. And again, people are like, are you crazy? Why would you put out jobs that you've been rejected from? And I was like, again, a lot of people are rejected, but people don't talk about it. And I got a message from a woman who said, I just read this to my husband who's been rejected for his 6th role, and it really helped, so thank you. And you have no idea who you're touching and how people are reacting to your stuff. And I just think it matters. And you've got to think bigger than you and your stuff. And I think over the years, I've had to come up against so much criticism, and not just criticism, like all out horrific behavior, mostly, as I said, from men who have tried to shout me down, who have called me all sorts of names, who have said that my work is trivial, who have said that I'm not a quote unquote proper marketer, that I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, etc., etc., etc. I mean, I've blown all of their careers out the water so they can go fuck themselves as far as I'm I've had to blow through all of that to get to the position now when nobody can touch me. Post whatever the fuck I want, and very few people are going to critique me at this point, because they know they're going to get it in the head if they do. But also, hopefully, I've proven now that you don't need to be so horrible to people, and you can let people celebrate themselves, and you can let people talk about vulnerabilities, especially women, and that there is so much collective power when we hype each other up and when we help each other out, connect over vulnerabilities, and when we shine the spotlight and say, hey, I'm really struggling, and someone says, I am too, and actually the fact that we've both written this and read this today has made us feel better and less alone, like that's the best possible outcome that we can hope for. And so when people try and shout you down and say your voice doesn't matter, or you don't know what you're doing, or you shouldn't be sharing that kind of content, fuck them. That's what Got Buttons for. I've got to the point now where I don't need to be liked by everybody, and I don't want to be liked by everybody. Whoever decides to follow me and takes value from my work, brilliant. And if you don't, then you don't need to be in my orbit at all. And that's okay.
I love that.
Amazing. Well,
before we get into the campaign, I just wanted... I'm going to skip one of them because I feel like we've talked about a lot of the projects, unless there's another project you want to highlight. But I wanted to ask you what the biggest challenge that you're facing right now is. Besides trying to do all the things.
That's probably what I'm facing, is just how to be a mother and a wife and a full human being and a business owner and someone whose profile is out there all at the same time. And it's never ending chaos, which is a real challenge. And I'm struggling with it, and I struggle with it every single day. I have a nanny, and my daughter goes to nursery, and the amount of guilt that I feel feel on a daily basis that the nanny is spending more time with my son than I am. But at the same time, I've got to earn the money because I pay the mortgage and I pay the childcare and I've got to get that stuff in. But also my work makes me happy.
Yeah.
And it makes me less frayed, which sounds weird considering the amount of work that I do, but it does make me feel less frayed emotionally, which means that when I am with my kids, I can be more present and I can be more proud of myself. But it's a never ending struggle because, you know, whenever you dive into one aspect of it, something else is going to drop. And to be honest, my relationship with my husband is frayed at the moment because we are spending so much time apart. He's military, way more than he's home. And then when he is home, you know, we're basically taking one kid each and firefighting the entire time and then collapsing in front of the TV to eat dinner in silence. You know, we're just in that stage. And again, you know, for a long time, I thought that was a problem. And actually, you know, the more I start investigating it and talking to friends and watching TikToks and being on Instagram, it's like, this is just what a relationship is when you're in the trenches with super young kids.
That's right.
You've got to get through it. And this is why the partnership needs to be strong at the beginning, because you're going to be pulled in separate directions over this time period. And when they start sleeping through the night and when they're not in nappies and when they can actually walk and talk and feed themselves, things will get easier. And I'm just kind of, you know, holding out for that moment. But again, it's just initially, I think I was looking at it as a personal failure of some kind. And then I just started realizing that actually this is just this chapter of our lives and it's fine and we'll get through it. And it's little moments. I'm sure you've both been through it as well, like in the kitchen when you catch each other's eye and you're just like, I'm still here. You know, we're still in this together. But, you know, the baby's just vomited all over himself and the dog's eating it off the floor and the toddler's just going to be, and she's got trousers and I've just dropped and smashed a bowl on the floor and fuck me, I need a bottle of wine right now. And that's just the reality.
Yeah, it's real. And again, another element, I'm not telling you to write another report, so don't add that to your plate, but it's totally another element that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
I had no idea that was a thing either until I started talking to friends and finding out that other people were going through the same thing too. So I think it just goes to also show how important community is and how important in an age where, you know, people are connecting on social media where we're just watching these perfect versions of things so often, and people are losing a lot of those interpersonal connections and conversations and in real life community elements, how important some of those conversations and relationships can be and are important to have and understand, and those support networks and just knowing. And again, like obviously also another thing that falls apart in those early years too is you feel like you never see your friends too. At least for me, that was definitely a real thing. And it's like the mom texts in the middle of the night to ask a question or, you know, the memes back and forth or whatever. But I think it's so important to be able to at least connect with people to know that you are not alone even in all of these experiences, and to dispel these myths that we can also have it all and that everything is perfect. So yes.
Yeah. It's impossible.
Yes.
I think, you end up doing that awful kind of early dating thing with your friends, which is breadcrumbing, which is like you give them the bare minimum text and just be like, hi. And then about 7 or 8 days later, they reply and go, oh yeah, hi. And then you basically just lob it backwards and forwards until you finally manage to meet for a coffee, which is twice a year. That's pretty much all you can manage at this point in time.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Zoe, I mean, we could talk to you all day. This is an incredible conversation. And we are going to jump into the campaign that you've brought us. So real quick for you and for our listeners, we're going to review the criteria that we use to evaluate some of these campaigns. So the first thing we always look at is alignment.
Next is partnerships.
Call to action and transparency.
Engagement.
Optimization and amplification.
So on that note, Zoe, if you can please tell us a little bit about the campaign that you brought us today, both the creative summary and then what you think this campaign is doing well.
So I want to talk about Pregnant Then Screwed's Career Shredder, which came out yesterday. And Pregnant Then Screwed is a small organization in the UK that has been lobbying for the last couple of years on various fronts to basically improve the working conditions and societal conditions for mothers across the country. And, you know, Pregnant Then Screwed, obviously, it does what it says on the tin. It's basically saying you get pregnant and then your entire life falls apart. And it's not necessarily your fault. It's the systems and organizations and institutional biases and economic taxes and everything that are all set up to push against whatever it is that you want to accomplish. And it's been spearheaded by a woman called Jolie, who's just been absolutely tireless in the work that she's done, and just how amazing she is. And she's actually stepping down as CEO in the next few weeks, again, because I think, she's done her part and she's driven it as far as she can drive it, and she probably just needs a bit of a mental health break. I don't blame her. They've done some amazing work over the years, just trying to raise awareness of different facts and trying to help people understand the reality of this situation. And one of the big ones is they did a piece of research many, many years ago in 2016 about the number of women who are let go while on maternity leave. And it was 54,000 women. And they did some more research this year, and that number has risen to 76,000, I believe. So it's an increase of 37% of women who are let go while on maternity leave. And they have created a visualization of that, essentially, with an old-fashioned shredder, and essentially invited women to shred their careers as a symbolic gesture of just how fucking stupid and wasteful it is to take all of that expertise and all of that just brilliance of women's brains and, the roles that they played in organizations, and just to say, hey, you've procreated and therefore your value is no longer anything to us. And I think the career shredder, it's only been out, as I said, for about 24 hours. But I think it's a beautiful visualization and a really strong visualization of the just senseless waste of all of this. And then also a way to announce that research, in a way that feels much more impactful as well. And I think, what they've done, little things like you can connect your LinkedIn to the website so you can kind of symbolically shred your own CV. And they've also done some beautiful out of home as well across the capital and across the rest of the country, which says, "Mum, you're fired." And it's kind of the shredded paper. So all of the text is slightly misaligned, which is gorgeous. But again, I think it's a really smart way of drawing attention to a study that could have just gone out as a bog standard press release and been covered by a couple of publications and then buried about 3 hours later.
Yeah. So true.
Such a powerful visual.
Yeah, it's a really, really smart idea. And it was actually spearheaded by a woman called Gemma Phillips, who's at Saatchi & Saatchi in the UK, creative director. She does a lot of work with Pregnant Then Screwed, and that was also worked on by some amazing designers and another creative team as well. But I think, what's amazing is these people come together mostly, as I said, pro bono, because they really believe in getting this out there. And I think what they've managed to produce is phenomenal. And it's something that Pregnant Then Screwed have always kind of pushed the boundaries creatively. There's another organization in the UK called the Dad Shift, which was founded by a guy at Meta and someone else as well. And, they're pushing for better paternity rights and better kind of, help for dads as well, which I think is equally as valuable. And they did something which I highlighted on LinkedIn, which is that they put plastic babies in baby slings and attached them to well-known male statues across London.
Yes.
That got amount of coverage.
That was great.
It was amazing.
But then when I started to kind of dig underneath it, I realized that actually that concept was first done by Pregnant Then Screwed, but it was done around the time of the pandemic. So the news of it got buried, but the idea of slings on statues with babies in them was actually pioneered by them a few years prior. So not to say that, that idea didn't necessarily work for Dad Shift, but I think in terms of sheer creativity and originality, Pregnant Then Screwed have always really kind of pushed the boat out to make sure that they get attention on these issues. And as I mentioned previously, people get really burnt out by these issues and burnt out by the news, and they almost become blind to it. And so the challenge with organizations such as Pregnant Then Screwed is, how do we draw attention to this stuff in really novel and interesting and original ways to make sure that people sit up and take notice when it's actually much easier to scroll past it.
And it looks like Pregnant and Screwed is a 501c3. I mean, they're a registered nonprofit.
Yeah, they're great, and their work is just phenomenal. And I think they've pushed for so much in terms of conversation and change and lobbying and contractual laws and that kind of stuff over the last couple of years. And I really think that they've probably made more headway than anyone else when it comes to mothers across the UK.
It's
So yeah,
unbelievable.
that's my campaign of choice. I think it's brilliant, and I'm really excited to see, you know, how it progresses and the kind of attention that it gets. And as I said, it's all super new at the moment, but you know, I shared it on my LinkedIn yesterday. I've seen it all over the place since then, and I just think that people are really starting to understand that, you know, 74,000 women or 76,000 women, I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, their careers are literally shredded and gone. And once those women are booted out, especially during maternity leave, it's incredibly difficult to then get them back in. And if they do get back in, the idea of them getting back in at the same level or being able to continue a career trajectory is basically not going to happen. You know, a lot of them stall out completely. Obviously, then childcare costs come in. And then if
Right.
they're not working during maternity leave, it may well then be that, like, actually, do you know what? I'll just stay home. It's cheaper because childcare in this country is insane. And then that's it. That's them kind of checked out of the workplace. And then I think that the real struggle is, you know, should they end up separating from their partners, they're the ones that are always going to be on the back foot financially because they're the ones that let their careers go, which is a nightmare. And then also, you know, you lose your sense of self to a certain degree. And again, you know, women who choose to be stay-at-home mothers, that's wonderful, but it has to be a choice as opposed to something that's kind of forced upon you, or something that's forced upon you because circumstances have made that choice for you in terms of a business letting you go.
Hmm.
And I also don't think that, you know, we have any understanding of the impact on a woman's mental health when they're let go from their job during maternity leave. You know, maternity leave is a period of integration or reintegration and deep, deep healing and getting to know yourself from a completely different perspective, especially if it's your first child. And we've only just begun to understand this concept of matrescence.
Yep.
I only
Yes.
started really understanding before my daughter was born. And, you know, from what they say around matrescence is it's the biggest biological shift and version of becoming since adolescence.
Yep.
And your brain chemistry and your body chemistry quite literally changes.
Yeah.
And you reintegrate all of that. It's not just like, oh, you popped a baby out, cool, you're still the exact same person that you were before, but now you're a mother. It's a full-on biological, psychological, physical process that
Yes.
doesn't just stop. You know, it carries on all the way through the rest of your life. You know,
I was
you
gonna
have those.
say, even thinking about perimenopause or menopause, right? Like the older generation of women who are also being discriminated against in the
Yeah.
workplace. It's yeah.
It's exactly that. And I think that we don't allow ourselves that time of becoming. And if something is pulled from underneath our feet, like a job that made us feel secure or that made us feel like, you know, we were financially, you know, competent, that is going to knock your confidence in yourself far more so than it would have at any other point in your life, because
Yeah.
they are hitting you when you're at your most vulnerable. And then
Yep.
trying to recover from that from a confidence perspective or an ability perspective is really fucking hard. And even if you're lucky enough to keep your job and you go back into the workplace after you've had, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months, a year, if you're super lucky, they expect you to just be exactly the same person that you were before and just to
Right.
get on with it and not question anything. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. I've gone through a fucking personality transplant and a, you know, physical metamorphosis here. And if I show any aspect of that, I'm going to be seen as less than or a failure. And as you said, it goes into perimenopause too. And I think
Yeah.
I had a really interesting conversation with an amazing strategist and woman called Nikki Crumpton, who's a CSO for a company called BTDT. And she said, you know, women are masking all the way through their lives, and the energy that takes is horrendous.
Mhm.
You know, when you're in your 20s and early 30s and you are, you know, basically more likely to be sexually assaulted and sexually harassed at that time,
Mhm.
mask it and you smile through it and you just kind of
Mhm.
go, oh, this is fine, you know, and then you
Mhm.
step out and you become a mother and you go back into the workplace and you are literally, as I said in a previous LinkedIn post, juggling chainsaws on a daily basis, and you are stretched in every single direction and you feel like a pile of shit and you feel like you're failing on the parent front and you're failing at the work front, but you mask it, you know, and you just
Mhm.
carry on like this is fine. And then you get into perimenopause, but you can't talk about that because then that starts to invite in this idea of ageism. And as we know, you know, when men turn into silver foxes, they apparently absorb even more gravitas and they travel up the fucking food chain. Women turn into, you know, from folklore, witches and wenches, and we're supposed to be banished, you know, to a shed in the forest somewhere. And where our relevance suddenly drops from, you know, okay to absolutely fucking zero. So if we
Yeah.
don't master that, then it hurts
Yeah.
us, you know, in many ways. So again, we have to kind of mask that bit. And then you get into actual hardcore ageism later on,
Yeah.
got to be down with the kids, and you've got to find a way of ingratiating yourself, knowing that, older women are probably seen as the least relevant workers around. And nobody knows why the fuck that is, because arguably they're the most relevant, from a brain capacity perspective and all the wisdom that they have and what they can actually do within an organization, from an emotional maturity perspective. But we can't wait to shove them in the rubbish dump and get them out the door. And so that entire life cycle of women from start to finish in the creative industries or in any organization, to be honest, is an extra level of exhausting, because not only are we juggling all of this stuff, but we are code switching, every single time we go into those organizations, and the energy that it takes to mask is enormous. And we don't take that into account.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know if you can see me like vigorously nodding every time you talk, but I'm just like, yes, all these things go through my brain every single day. Yes, yes, and yes. I was curious, and I know the Career Shredder just came out, and I was trying to poke around a little bit, but was too captivated to poke around very much. Do you know if Pregnant and Screwed then partners with other organizations doing other work within similar spaces, or even any corporate partnerships where it may make sense because companies are actually doing something about this? Like, do you know how involved they've gotten in that? Because I know it's interesting, at least in the US, and seeing so many of these different organizations trying to tackle these issues from different perspectives. But then simultaneously, so often you're like, I imagine these people know each other, but it doesn't seem like they're collaboratively working on anything a lot of the times. Do you know if they partner with other orgs on any of their campaigns?
I'm pretty sure they do. And I think they have partnerships at different levels, but I wouldn't be able to confidently say exactly what those are. I just know that they're an incredibly collaborative and smart bunch. So I wouldn't be surprised if they've got fingers in lots of different pies, from everything from working with actual organizations on HR and workplace pieces to sort of governmental being as well. But yeah, I think they're pretty impressive.
That's amazing.
What a great campaign. I mean, truly. And, all right, I'm going to practice what I preach. Like, we talk about how, we need to share these experiences. And I was just thinking about how after my second miscarriage, I had been working for a branding agency, and before I could even let them know that I was okay and like physically okay, I got a notification. I got an email saying that I had been moved to part-time.
Oh my God.
And it's just shit like that just knocks you down so many pegs that it's like, kick me while I'm down, right? and I think it's brutal what women have to go through when we're just trying to heal our bodies, like you said, and we're still bleeding, and we're jumping on conference calls, or we're trying to find our next gig, or we're trying to figure out who our next client's going to be. Just the fact that we don't have that space is so damn hard. And I don't think anybody, unless you are going through it, you just don't know. And, I always say, like, I wish I had gone to, my mom friends earlier and been like, how can I help? What can I do? Like, but you just don't know until you go through it.
Yeah.
I think that's the other issue as well, is I think when we're basically shredding the careers of women and we are pushing them out the door in a super trigger happy way the minute they hit 35 and over, we don't have women at the top who are people who have gone through these experiences and who are able to build policies and reactions and organizational protocols to be able to respond to this stuff. So we have a gigantic lack of understanding and empathy at the top, which then filters through into shitty emails like the one that you got, which has no humanity, and has zero understanding of any of the context. And I think when it comes to miscarriage as well, the vast majority of women miscarry in the first 12 weeks. And we're taught from a societal perspective that you don't tell anybody that you're pregnant until you're 12 weeks for that reason. But that doesn't mean you aren't going through it emotionally. And so what you're supposed to just go through it in silence and turn up, to your pitch meeting the next day all laughs. It doesn't make any sense. And, one of the stories that I had put in the Motherlode, which was just heartbreaking, was a woman who was running for a train to go to a pitch with her boss. And she realized as she was running that she was miscarrying. And she had to get on the train, miscarry in the toilet, do the pitch, and just grit her teeth through the whole thing and deal with it in silence, because she was terrified of the impact it would have if she chose that moment to duck out because of how important it was to the business. And that's just one story amongst hundreds and hundreds, that I got. And I wasn't able to feature all of them in the Motherlode, but it was really important for me to feature a range. And that was one of them that hit me really hard, which was, you are literally losing your baby and you can't talk about it. You've just got to get on with it. And you've got to put the organization first and go and be your professional self in that pitch meeting. And meanwhile, your heart is breaking. And it's just, it's insane.
And then the company pushes you out the door because now you've had your kids, so they don't have a use for you anymore. So it doesn't matter that you just gave up everything to be there for them. The company doesn't see value in you anyways. So good luck to you. It's insane.
I think someone said that, and I can't remember the exact wording, but I put it in the report because I loved it so much. And they said, you feel like when you're working your ass off and you're working Saturdays or you're working till Thursday night at 3:00 in the morning and you're sleeping on the sofa in the foyer and you're living on Deliveroo and you're letting relationships slide, you feel like you're putting coins into, a kind of savings box, in terms of look at all of for you from an organizational perspective. I've bent over backwards. I haven't asked for sleep. I haven't asked for sustenance. Yeah, of course I'll jump on that plane that you've given me 7 hours notice for, and I'll figure it out later. And you feel like you're kind of earning some sort of stability or some sort of loyalty. And then when you have a child or when you decide to become a mother, none of that matters. And they, as you said, they just boot you out the fucking door anyway. And it's just like, well, hang on a minute. I poured all of that energy and all of that time and I sacrificed so much for this. And you're not giving me anything. I've not earned anything. You've given me no loyalty. And I wish that we could tell younger people that that's the case, because maybe they wouldn't put so much of themselves into the organization. And also, as a creative industry, as a business, unfortunately, this is how they run. They get a whole bunch of cheap labor in their youth. They sell them on this promise and aspiration of, great heights and creativity and all of that kind of stuff. And they flog them to death until they burn out, and then they kick them out, and then they get fresh meat in the door, and they repeat the cycle all over again. So if younger people understood the reality of the business model, the whole business model would collapse because it is predicated on this as a process.
Yes. Yeah. There's so many more. I feel like there's every time I was like, there's so many more things to go into, but I know we're at time, but this has been incredible. I know we both 100% are looking forward to continuing to watch all of the amazing work that you put out and continue these conversations offline, hopefully, because literally everything that has come out of your mouth, so aligned on so many of these issues and conversations. And it's so refreshing to see other people doing this work and caring about these issues and being a good person and humanity and all of it. So we greatly appreciate you being so vulnerable and coming here to share your voice with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me have a monologue for the better part of 90 minutes.
We loved all of it.
It was incredible.
So many gems.
Where can folks learn more about you and your work, Zoe?
Probably just LinkedIn, and then my Substack, which is Musings of a Wandering Mind. But I don't promise to have anything that comes out with any kind of frequency. I just put stuff out there when I feel like it. So it could be, a 6-minute gap or a 6-month gap. But when I publish stuff, it'll be there.
We will link to those both in the show notes.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for helping us shine a light and learn from those who are doing it well and reducing the missed opportunities for good.
We want to hear from you. Let us know, what campaigns are you seeing that are doing it well? Who would you like to see us interview, and what campaign would you like to see us audit?
Thank you again, Zoe, for being here and joining us on our mission to revolutionize the industry that we love.
Missed Opportunities for Good is a production of Aligned for Impact and Love of Good.